Rain lashes the castle gates when a boy no older than 5 appears, clutching a rusted locket. "I'm here for my father," he says, voice steady through the storm. The guards laugh, until the Alpha King himself steps into the hall and freezes. The child's amber eyes mirror his own. If the boy is his, then who did he banish 5 years ago? If your past came back wearing your own eyes, would you still call it a mistake? Comment your answer. 5 years earlier, Evelyn Moreau had been the blade in Adrian's hand and the breath in his lungs. The commander who won him a kingdom and the woman who dared to dream it gentler. Then the vault was breached. Sacred runes disappeared. His brother lay dead with her crest on the murder dagger and her signature on a letter to the enemy. She met his accusation with the only words that could save him and doom her. "If I speak, you'll lose everything." He exiled her before dawn. Silence made her guilty in the eyes of the court. Silence made him king in the eyes of the fearful. But Evelyn's silence had been a shield. Adrian's late father had bargained with the Shadow Court, binding every heir to a blood price due before a firstborn's 5th birthday. The runes weren't stolen, they were destroyed, and she took the blame to bury the pact. No one knew she was carrying the child who would trigger it. Now, the storm delivered him to the throne she'd protected. Court sycophants smirked, a peasant brat with delusions, until Adrian stepped into the hall and the boy's face ended the laughter. "Who sent you?" the king asked. Lucien pressed the locket into his palm. Inside, a lock of gold hair and the royal wolf sigil scorched into metal. That night, moonlight revealed faint sigils glimmering across the child's skin, the mark only true blood carries. The past did not knock. It walked in and asked to be fed. And somewhere beyond the rain, a rider crossed the border without a blade, a cloak soaked with night and resolve. Evelyn Moreau was coming home, not to beg, but to warn. The blood pact had come due. The Alpha King would have to choose. His pride or his blood. Perfect. Understood completely. The night she crossed the border, the mountains were on fire behind her. Evelyn didn't look back. The smoke carried the scent of iron and wolf blood. And beneath the echo of hooves came the ghost of Adrian's voice. Traitor. The word had followed her through snow, through silence, through the long ache of nights when the only warmth came from the secret pulsing beneath her ribs. She'd thought death would claim her on the 3rd day of running, when the royal scouts finally wob up the chase and the wilderness swallowed her whole. But death had no interest in her. Not yet. The child would not let her die. She stumbled into a nameless village on the far edge of the borderlands. A cluster of smoke-grey huts, pressed against the teeth of the mountains. The locals took her for a refugee from the northern wars, too hollow-eyed and blood-soaked to question. When they asked her name, she gave them the first word that didn't hurt, Ira. It meant snow in their tongue. A fitting name for a woman burying her past beneath layers of frost. The months that followed blurred into endurance. The world shrank to the rhythm of her breath, the scrape of frost on window panes, and the heartbeat within her that grew stronger by the day. She mended nets, gathered herbs, and traded silence for survival. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Adrian's face. Not the king, but the man who used to trace battle maps on her palm, whispering of peace and children that would never know the sword. she would wake choking on the lie of it. And yet, when the first snow thawed and the pain came, she bit her lip until it bled rather than cry his name. The boy arrived on a storm. The midwife said no child should have survived that night, but he did. He came into the world quietly, without a single cry. A small, perfect creature, with his father's amber eyes and a birthmark shaped like a crescent moon over his heart. When the firelight touched his skin, faint symbols shimmered there. Not scars, but sigils, ancient and silver, shifting as if alive. Evelyn wept, holding him against her chest. "Lucien," she whispered, "my light." It was the name of her first victory, her first rebellion, a reminder that even in ruin, something could still burn. Years passed. The war in the north ended. Kings rose and fell in rumors that never reached this frozen edge of the realm. Evelyn lived as a healer, known for her strange herbs and stranger eyes. Her neighbors thought her touched by the old gods. Children whispered that she spoke to wolves. They weren't wrong. Sometimes, when the moon hung low and red, she'd wake to the sound of howling. Not near, not far, but inside her dreams. In those visions, wolves made of ash and fire circled a throne of bone. A crown burned above it, dripping gold like blood. And from the shadows, a voice she once loved whispered the debt must be paid. Each time she woke shaking, clutching Lucien close. He was 4 by then, bright, fearless, too curious for safety. He asked questions about his father that she never answered. Instead, she told him stories about wolves that guarded kings, about promises that should never have been made, about the kind of love that could burn down worlds. At night, he would fall asleep, tracing the rune-shaped scar that glowed faintly on his chest. When the 5th winter came, the dreams grew stronger. The wolves were no longer in her mind. She found their prints outside her cottage. Enormous, burned into the snow as if made by something not entirely of this world. Her heart stopped when she saw the sigil at the center of each print. The royal wolf, encircled by flame. That was when she knew. The shadow court had begun to stir. Evelyn spent the next night scouring the ruins of old monasteries and forgotten shrines. She traded sleep for parchment and hunger for ink. The villagers whispered that the healer had gone mad, her candle burning through the endless night as she read forbidden texts. In truth, she wasn't reading history. She was reading prophecy, and it told her what she already feared. The pact was real. Centuries ago, Adrian's ancestor, the first Alpha King, had sealed a blood contract with the Shadow Court in exchange for strength and dominion. The curse demanded a debt from each generation. The soul of the king's firstborn, offered before the child reached 5 years of age. In return, the realm would thrive. The wolves would obey. The crown would never fall. Evelyn realized then what Adrian's father had hidden, what his madness in his final days had meant. Every heir of the KL line was born marked. The sigils that shimmered across Lucien's chest weren't blessings, they were targets. That night, Evelyn packed what little she had. The coded runes she'd once destroyed to sever the curse, her father's worn dagger, and the locket Adrian had given her the night before the vault burned. Lucien watched her with wide eyes from the doorway, his curls tousled by the mountain wind. "Are we leaving again, Mama?" he asked softly. She knelt before him, brushing a thumb across his cheek. No, love. Not yet. But if something happens to me, you must remember this. He frowned. You're not going anywhere. I mean it, she said, forcing calm into her voice. There's a man across the mountains. He wears a crown and carries the same eyes as you. If anyone asks who your father is, you tell them his name. Adrian Kale. Promise me. Lucien nodded, solemn as a soldier. I promise. She smiled faintly, but her hands trembled as she fastened the locket around his neck. By dawn, the wind had gone still. Too still. The birds had vanished from the trees. Evelyn lit a single candle and traced her finger across an ancient rune drawn in ash on the floor. The lines pulsed faintly, like veins beneath the skin. Her notes covered the walls. Bloodline diagrams, curse sigils, fragments of the counterverse written in her own hand. She had spent 5 years trying to understand the bargain Adrian's father made. But now she realized knowledge came too late. The contract was counting down. Her son's 5th birthday was tomorrow. When the candle guttered out, she felt the shift in the air. A pressure, like the inhale before a scream. From beyond the window, faint crimson light began to bleed across the snow. Evelyn stepped outside barefoot. The mountain wind cut like knives, but she didn't feel it. Her gaze lifted to the sky. The moon was rising. Too large, too red. The blood moon. The same omen that had crowned her exile. She whispered to the dark, "Not again." Somewhere, deep in the woods, the wolves began to howl. Not wild, but in unison. Lucien stirred in his sleep, the sigil over his heart glowing faintly beneath his shirt. Evelyn returned inside, gripping the edge of the table to steady herself. Her mind burned through memories. The vault, the dagger, Adrian's eyes as he sentenced her. He had thought he was protecting his crown. He'd never realized he was protecting the curse. She had destroyed the runes once to stop the pact. But destroying a curse didn't end it. It only delayed it. Now the delay was over. The words she'd once read in the Shadow Codex echoed in her head. The blood of the heir or the blood of the bond. One must be given, one must remain. Her heart sank. The curse demanded a life. Either Lucien's or hers. She looked to the sleeping boy. In the candle's dim glow, his small hand twitched. The same way Adrian's used to when dreaming. For a moment, she saw the man she'd loved, the life that might have been. Then she turned away. There was no time for dreams now. Evelyn began writing. A letter sealed in wax with her own blood, marked with the sigil of the royal wolves. She addressed it to one man only, to His Majesty, Adrian Kale. Her hand didn't shake as she wrote the final line. The pact has come due. They will come for the boy before dawn. When the ink dried, she pressed the locket to her lips and whispered a prayer she no longer believed in. Then she stepped into the snow and buried the letter beneath a runestone, binding it with the last of her strength. The winds carried her words toward the capital. Somewhere far beyond the mountains, a king stirred in his sleep, dreaming of fire, of wolves, and of a child's voice calling him father. As dawn broke over the borderlands, the first crimson rays of the blood moon touched the roof of her cottage. Evelyn felt the old magic awakening, the kind that did not forgive mistakes, only remembered them. She looked once more at her son, still sleeping, his breath steady, unaware. "Tomorrow," she whispered, "I'll keep you safe, even if it kills me." Outside, the wolves answered her vow. The sigils on Lucien's skin flared faintly, casting light across the room. The mark of the royal bloodline pulsed once, twice, then settled. Evelyn watched, her throat tight, as the faint whisper of the curse rippled through the night. The heir is 5. The rain came first, thin, needling, relentless. By the time the storm reached the capital, it had turned the sky into molten pewter and the castle walls into rivers of black stone. The fortress that once glittered with banners now crouched beneath thunder, its torches guttering against the wind like dying hearts. At the gate stood a boy no older than 5, barefoot, drenched to the bone. In his fist, he clutched a tarnished locket. The guards found him at dawn, huddled against the iron doors. His lips blue, but his gaze steady. He didn't cry, didn't beg. He just stared up at them with eyes the color of molten amber. The kind only one man in the northern realm possessed. "Lost, are you, boy?" one of the guards asked, leaning close enough to see the faint shimmer of runes across the child's wrist. "Where'd you crawl from?" The boy shook his head. "I'm not lost." "Oh no?" The man smirked. "Then what are you doing here?" The boy straightened, small shoulders squaring in the rain. "I'm here to find my father." That earned laughter. The second guard spat into the mud. "Your father, eh? And who might he be, pup?" The boy looked him dead in the eye. "His name is Adrian Kale." The laughter died. For a heartbeat, all they heard was the storm. Within the fortress, the Alpha King of the North sat through another council meeting that stank of wine and fear. The nobles droned on about dwindling crops, rising tensions with the southern houses, and the fading of the old magic, the same problems that had haunted his reign since the day he took the crown. Adrian Kale listened without hearing. The sound of rain against the high glass windows felt more honest than any of their words. It had been 5 years since he'd last heard Evelyn Moreau's name spoken aloud. 5 years since the night he'd condemned her for treason and watched her disappear into the dark, her silence as sharp as a blade. 5 years since the runes began dying. Now, even the sacred wards beneath the castle, the same ones that protected the realm from the cursed borders, flickered like a dying heartbeat. The priests called it a divine test. Adrian called it decay. A knock shattered his thoughts. Captain Theron entered, dripping rain from his cloak. "Your Majesty," he said, voice uneasy. "There's, something you should see." The boy stood in the great hall, a small figure swallowed by the vastness of stone and shadow. His clothes were torn, his hair soaked, but his spine was unbroken. Around him, courtiers whispered like crows. "A peasant brat," someone sneered. "A beggar's trick," muttered another. "No child of royal blood would walk barefoot to a fortress." The Chancellor, Malric Voss, said coldly, "This is nonsense." But when Adrian stepped through the doors, the murmurs fell away. The boy turned. The torches caught his face. For a moment, the king forgot how to breathe. Amber eyes, the same amber as his own. Adrian froze mid-step. The hall seemed to narrow until there was only him and the boy, like the world itself held its breath between them. "Who sent you here?" Adrian asked, his voice cutting through the silence like ice. The boy said nothing. He just reached into his tunic and pulled out the locket. My mother said you'd know her by this. He held it out with trembling fingers. The king hesitated, then took it. The moment the cold metal touched his palm, the room seemed to tilt. The locket's hinge groaned open. Inside was a curl of golden hair, Evelyn's, and the sigil of the royal wolves etched in silver, tarnished but unmistakable. Adrian's throat closed. The world roared with rain. Where did you get this? He demanded, though his voice barely rose above a whisper. The boy's answer was simple, calm, final. She gave it to me before the moon turned red. Malric Voss stepped forward, robes whispering across the marble. Your Majesty, surely you see this for what it is, a deception. The traitor's spawn seeks to poison your court with lies. Adrian's jaw tightened. He couldn't look away from the boy's eyes. Who are you, child? He asked again. Lucien, the boy said. Lucien Moreau. The hall erupted in noise. Whispers, gasps, disbelief. Moreau. The name was ash in their mouths. Adrian felt the ground tilt beneath him. His pulse pounded in his ears. The child stood perfectly still in the chaos, the storm's light flashing behind him like prophecy. He looks just like her, Adrian thought. No, he looks like me. Enough, the king snapped. The hall fell silent. He turned to Theron. Bring the boy to the east wing. Keep him warm, feed him, and... He hesitated. See that no harm comes to him. Malric's voice turned oily. Your Majesty, with respect, this is dangerous sentiment. If the witch left spawn, then the curse she carried may live within him. Allow the priests to examine the child before... Before what? Adrian's tone cut like a blade. Before you condemn him as you condemned his mother. The Chancellor flinched. I only meant to protect the crown. Adrian's eyes hardened. So did she. The words slipped out before he could stop them. For the first time in 5 years, Malric Voss went silent. That night, thunder rolled endlessly across the sky. Adrian sat alone in his private chamber, the locket lying open on the table beside him. He turned it over and over between his fingers, tracing the worn edges as if they could whisper her name back to him. Evelyn. He had spent years trying not to think of her. But memory was a cruel thing. It returned in pieces. The smell of sage on her hands, the taste of her laughter, the warmth of her head against his shoulder when they dreamed of a world without war. He'd killed that world with one command. Now her ghost had returned in the shape of a boy. A soft knock at the door pulled him from his thoughts. It was Theron. He's asleep, Your Majesty, but you should see this. Adrian followed him down the corridor to the east wing. Inside a small chamber, the boy lay curled beneath blankets too large for him to own. His breathing slow and even. The candlelight flickered across his skin, and that was when Adrian saw it. A faint shimmer beneath the boy's collarbone. Lines of silver light, almost invisible, curling into the shape of the royal sigil. The same mark that every heir of the Kale bloodline carried from birth. Adrian's heart stopped. He reached out, hesitant, as if touching the mark would make it real. But when his fingers brushed the boy's skin, the sigil pulsed faintly, responding to him. Theron's voice was low. "I've never seen anything like it." Adrian swallowed hard. "I have." Sleep refused to come that night. He paced before the window as the storm dragged its claws across the sky. Every time lightning flashed, he saw Evelyn's eyes, calm, defiant. The moment before she'd spoken those last words. "If I speak, you'll lose everything." He'd believed she meant the throne. Now he wondered if she'd meant something else entirely. At the stroke of midnight, he opened the locket again. Inside, beneath the curl of hair, something glinted. A hidden engraving along the edge he'd never noticed before. He lifted it toward the firelight and squinted. Words. Small, delicate, carved in her hand. "When the blood moon rises, remember what was bound to you." He stared until the letters blurred. Outside, thunder answered the words with a low growl. Adrian pressed the locket shut and looked toward the east wing. Through the dark corridor, he could feel it, the faint, impossible awareness of being watched. Not by spies, nor ghosts. By something deeper. The child's eyes. At dawn, he found himself standing once more at the boy's door. He didn't know why he'd come. Maybe to question him again. Maybe to convince himself this was all a trick. But when he pushed the door open, Lucien was already awake, sitting by the window, watching the rain. "You don't sleep?" Adrian asked quietly. The boy turned, face lit by the weak morning light. "Mama said dreams aren't safe for people like us." A chill crawled through the king's spine. "People like us?" Lucien tilted his head, studying him the same way Evelyn once had, unflinching, patient. People who carry too much magic and not enough love. Adrian didn't speak for a long time. When he finally did, his voice was hoarse. "Your mother told you to find me. Why, sir?" Lucien looked down, fingers playing with the locket. "She said the shadows were coming back. She said you'd know what to do." Adrian's gaze hardened. When did she say that? Before the moon turned red. The words hit him like a blade. His pulse quickened. The blood moon, the same omen that had marked Evelyn's exile, that had haunted his father's reign. Adrian crouched before the boy. "Lucien," he'd said carefully, "where is your mother now?" Lucien's amber eyes lifted to his. The silence that followed was heavier than truth. "She said she'd come when it was time." The king rose slowly, the room suddenly too small, the air too thick. He turned toward the door, jaw clenched. "Get the priests," he told Theron outside, "and the seers, quietly." As he walked away, thunder broke again over the horizon. And though he could not see it, the boy at the window was watching the sky. The same way his mother had on the night she whispered her vow to the mountains. That night, Adrian lay awake, the storm raging above the fortress. Every time lightning split the sky, he saw a pair of amber eyes gleaming in the dark. Sometimes the boy's, sometimes hers. By dawn, he could no longer tell which haunted him more. The locket on his table glowed faintly in the dark, pulsing once, twice, as though answering a heartbeat 5 years and 1,000 miles away. The rain did not stop for 3 days. It drummed on the spires like a dirge, seeped into stone and bone alike, until even the hearth fires hissed in defeat. The kingdom whispered that storms meant the spirits were restless. Adrian Cale knew better. Storms meant memory refused to sleep. He had not left the castle since the boy arrived. He could not. Every corridor echoed with the same question. Who was the child? And worse, what if he wasn't a lie? They brought Lucien to the council chamber at dawn. The hall that had once sentenced Evelyn now sat in perfect symmetry. The same throne, the same iron banners, the same chancellor standing just to the left, pretending reverence. Malric Voss bowed low, but the gesture dripped poison. Your Majesty, the boy's tale insults the crown. Let me dispose of him quietly. Rumors of witch spawn unsettle the people. Adrian's gaze stayed on the boy before him. Lucien's clothes had been dried, his hair brushed, yet something untamed lingered in him, a wildness that no servant's hand could tame. So he stood calm, unflinching beneath the council's scrutiny. Adrian rose from his throne and descended the dais, each step ringing through the chamber. State your name. Lucien Moreau. The sound scraped something raw in Adrian's chest. And your mother? Lucien hesitated. You already know. A ripple of discomfort spread among the nobles. Malric Voss seized it like a vulture. You see? Defiance already festers in him. He carries her insolence, her blasphemy. Enough, Adrian said quietly. The single word cracked the air like lightning. He faced the boy again. Tell me, Lucien Moreau, who taught you that name? My mother, the boy answered simply, before the moon turned red. That phrase again. The same one Evelyn had used the night she'd warned him of things he refused to believe. Adrian crouched, lowering his voice so only the boy could hear. Do you know what you're saying? Do you know what happens to liars in this hall? Lucien's amber eyes didn't waver. Mama said kings forget faster than ghosts. Malric Voss inhaled sharply. Enough riddles. The witch's blood makes him dangerous. Allow me to rid us of this curse before it spreads. The council murmured agreement. Fear disguised as loyalty. Adrian straightened slowly, his shadow swallowing the child's. No. The Chancellor's composure slipped. Your Majesty, I said no. Adrian's tone turned to iron. Until truth is proven, the boy lives. He will remain under guard in the eastern wing. But sire, do not test me, Malric. For a moment, something like fear flickered in the old man's eyes. Then he bowed low, hiding the tremor in his jaw. As you command. When the hall emptied, Adrian lingered, staring at the chair where Evelyn had once knelt in chains. He remembered the echo of her voice, calm, too calm, as she whispered, If I speak, you'll lose everything. He'd thought she meant treason. Now he wasn't sure she hadn't meant him. The boy's words gnawed at him. So did the locket, the mark on the child's chest, the way the storm refused to end, as if the heavens themselves refused closure. He spent the day rereading the sealed records of her trial. Each line was a blade turned backward. Evidence compiled by Malric Voss, signed in Adrian's own hand. The forged letters, the planted crest, the silence he'd mistaken for guilt. Every page dripped with her name like an accusation. And still, he could not bring himself to believe she might be alive. That night, unable to rest, Adrian went to the east wing. The guards snapped to attention, but he waved them off. Inside, Lucien sat on the windowsill, legs tucked beneath him, eyes fixed on the rain. He didn't look up when the door opened. He was humming. a melody soft as candle smoke, slow as memory. Adrian froze. It was the same tune Evelyn used to hum while studying maps by the fire, when she thought he slept. An old folk song from the southern border about lovers separated by war. He hadn't heard it since the night before her exile. For a moment, the world blurred. The scent of sage and ink filled his mind. Her laughter, low and secretive, whispered just beyond reach. Lucien's voice pulled him back. "You know the song, Kathy?" Adrian swallowed hard. "Who taught you that?" "My mother. She said it helps the storms pass." He forced a breath. "Does it work?" Lucien shrugged. "It did, until now." Adrian turned away, before the boy could see the war behind his eyes. In his chambers, the storm's reflection trembled across the window glass. And for the first time in years, he allowed memory its full shape so. He saw Evelyn as she had been before the accusations. Sunlight on steel, her braid whipping in the wind as she sparred with him in the training yard. The curve of her mouth when she dared contradict him before the council. The night she'd whispered her dream of a kingdom where children were born to peace, not prophecy. He remembered how that dream had ended, with his voice ordering her banishment. And beneath it all, the silence that followed her out of his life. The kind that sounded suspiciously like loyalty. Malricht Voss came to him before dawn, as he always did when fear disguised itself as duty. "Your Majesty," he began softly. The boy's presence unsettles the nobles. The longer he remains, the more dangerous whispers grow. "I implore you, let me arrange a quiet disappearance." Adrian's jaw tightened. "You forged her conviction, Malulric." "You will not forge his." The Chancellor's eyes narrowed. "I served your father, and now you. I have always done what must be done for the crown." "That," Adrian said, "is what Evelyn once said too." Malric paled. "You compare her heresy to my loyalty?" "I compare the cost," the king replied. "Leave me." The Chancellor bowed stiffly, but his gaze lingered on the fire. "Your Majesty will regret this mercy." When the door closed, Adrian stared into the flames until his eyes burned. The storm had passed outside, but inside the wind still howled. That evening, when he returned to his chamber, the hearth had gone cold. A single candle burned on his desk. Beneath it lay a sealed envelope, the wax stamped with a sigil no living soul should possess. The crescent wolf of House Moreau. His breath caught. He broke the seal. Inside was a single line, written in a hand he had once traced across maps, across skin, across destiny itself. "The blood moon is not finished with us. Protect the child. He is what you were meant to be." No signature, no explanation. Only her scent. Wild sage and iron. Adrian's hand trembled as he folded the letter shut. Outside, the thunder returned, distant this time, like footsteps drawing near. And for the first time since her exile, the Alpha King of the North whispered her name aloud. "Evelyn." The walls seemed to breathe in answer. The candle guttered, and the letter's seal began to bleed faint silver light, like the shimmer of a long-forgotten rune reawakening. Somewhere in the east wing, a child began to hum again, and the melody wound its way through stone and shadow until it reached the king's heart. The castle slept uneasily. Outside Atom, the wind carried the scent of ash and rain. Inside, the king sat motionless, The letter open on his desk, the candle burning low. The blood pact your father made has come due. They'll come for the boy next moonrise. He read it again, then again. Each repetition sank like a blade turning in his ribs. The words weren't a warning, they were a sentence. Adrian's hand shook as he lowered the parchment. The ink shimmered faintly, alive with threads of silver light, the same hue that haunted his dreams since the night Evelyn was condemned. He could almost hear her voice, quiet, steady, unbroken even in chains. If I speak, you'll lose everything. Now he knew she hadn't been threatening him. Boots. She'd been begging him to listen. By dawn, the torches in the Hall of Oracles blazed once more, summoned by royal decree. 6 seers stood before the throne, their faces veiled, their bodies draped in the grey of mourning. They bowed as one, though the oldest, an ancient woman with a voice like breaking glass, spoke without lifting her head. The curse you ask about, Your Majesty, was born before you, before your father, before memory itself. Adrian's voice was hoarse. Tell me what it demands. The woman raised her head. Her eyes were white as frost. Blood, Majesty. It always demands blood. A murmur rippled through the gathered court. Adrian's hand tightened on the arm of his throne. Whose? The seer's lips curved in something too sad to be a smile. The blood of your line. The pact was written in the shadow between moonrise and dawn, sealed by your father's hand to preserve his reign. The price. The soul of the firstborn heir before the 5th year's end. Each generation renewed it through ritual sacrifice. The air grew cold. Adrian felt his throat close, and if the sacrifice is denied, then the crown falls. The wolves turn on the blood they once guarded. The kingdom consumes itself. The hall fell silent. Rain thundered against the glass above them, as though the heavens mocked the sound of human fear. He turned sharply to Malric Voss, who lingered at the back like a vulture in velvet. You knew! The Chancellor's face blanched. Sire, You knew! Adrian's voice cracked, raw and terrible. You forged her guilt. You sent her to exile to bury this secret. Malric dropped to one knee. I served the throne. It was the late king's command, his dying will. And I carried it out. Adrian whispered, realization hollowing his voice. I banished the only one who tried to end it. He dismissed the court with a single wave, ignoring their murmurs, their fear. When the hall emptied, only the echo of a thunder remained. Adrian sank onto the steps of the dais, the letter crumpled in his fist. Images stormed through his mind. Evelyn's face in torchlight, her silence, the night the runes were destroyed. He remembered the outrage, the fury, the betrayal that burned through him when she refused to defend herself. But now he saw it differently. The runes weren't stolen. They were destroyed. Destroyed to sever the chain that bound his family to the Shadow Court. She hadn't betrayed him. She'd saved him. Every accusation, every lash, every exile had been her shield. Her silence had been her weapon. Her suffering, her offering. Adrian's breath caught as a truth colder than steel struck him. She never lied, I did. He had told himself justice demanded her punishment. But justice had never been the goal. Control had. Fear had. Pride had. He rose too fast, gripping the edge of the table to steady himself. The walls of the throne room blurred. He could feel his father's ghost laughing in the dark corners, mocking him with the same madness that had ruled the old king's eyes. When Captain Theron found him hours later, Adrian was in the chapel, alone, kneeling before the great wolf statue that guarded the royal altar. Rain leaked through cracks in the ceiling, each drop echoing like the slow count of judgment. "She was right," the king murmured, his voice breaking, all of it. "She said the bloodline was cursed, that my father's legacy was built on slaughter. I called it blasphemy. I called her traitor, but she..." His words splintered. Theron approached quietly, setting a hand on his shoulder. "Sire, whatever this curse demands, we'll find a way to..." "No." Adrian's eyes lifted, hollow but fierce. "There is no we. I destroyed the only one who could break it." He looked down at his hands. "The kingdom I built rests on her ruin." That night, guilt took shape in the storm. He couldn't escape her presence. Her scent lingered in the letter's folds. Her voice hummed through the corridors in echoes of the boy's lullaby. Every torchlight shimmered like the silver glow of the sigil beneath Lucien's skin. Sleep became impossible. He sat by the window, watching lightning split the horizon into veins of fires. Each flash revealed his reflection against the glass, a man wearing a crown that now felt more like a shackle. He thought of Evelyn walking away from him, chains clinking softly like wind chimes. He had told himself she deserved it, that duty came before desire. But duty without mercy was nothing but another kind of madness. He pressed the locket to his lips. "You burned the world to save me," he whispered. "And I..." The words died in his throat. Outside, thunder cracked like bone. In the deepest hours before dawn, he summoned the archivist, an old scholar who'd served both his father and grandfather. "What do you know of the Blood Pact?" Adrian asked. The archivist hesitated, gaze darting toward the sealed door. "Majesty, such things are forbidden to speak." "Then whisper." The old man's voice trembled. It was the first Kakil king who made it. He sought dominion over the wolves, the old god's messengers. They offered him power beyond measure, a crown that no blade could pierce, an army that no fear could break. But in exchange, they demanded balance. Each heir must return a soul to the fire from which the Kale name was forged. Adrian's stomach turned. So my father continued it. "Yes, Bez, Majesty." But he hid it well. When he could not bear the death of his firstborn, your brother, he turned to the priest for alternatives. That was when the runes were created, to contain the curse without paying the price. Adrian's eyes went cold, and Evelyn destroyed them. The archivist nodded. Then the chain broke. Temporarily. "How long?" The old man bowed his head. 5 years. The curse resets when the heir reaches his 5th year. Adrian's breath froze in his lungs. Lucien. He stumbled from the chamber, the world spinning. The thunder outside grew louder, relentless, pounding against the stone as if the heavens themselves were trying to get in. He reached his chambers, collapsing against the table. The letter lay where he'd left it, the ink now pulsing faintly like a living vein. His hands shook as he whispered the words aloud. "They'll come for the boy next moonrise." The candle flickered violently, throwing long shadows across the walls. For a moment, the shape of one shadow didn't move with the rest. It lingered by the door, tall, cloaked, familiar. Adrian froze. He turned slowly, the storm's light flashing across his face. The door creaked open. Rain poured into the hall as the gates groaned wide. Soldiers shouted. Lightning turned the world white. Through the chaos, a single figure walked steadily up the flooded courtyard, cloaked, hooded, unarmed. The guards raised their spears. Adrian stepped forward, heart hammering in disbelief. The wind caught the hood and tore it back. Golden hair, soaked and tangled. Eyes sharp as dawn breaking through storm clouds. For a heartbeat, neither spoke. Evelyn Moreau, alive, and walking through the gates she'd left in chains. The thunder split the sky open, as if the heavens themselves bowed to the moment. And in that flash of light, Adrian realized the truth. The curse had never been waiting for the boy. It had been waiting for her. The gates slammed shut behind her with the force of destiny. The guards fell to one knee without knowing why. Adrian's voice broke the silence, raw and unbelieving. Evelyn? She lifted her gaze to him, eyes burning like the blood moon itself. It's time, she said. They're coming for what your father promised. The thunder answered her. The storm had not stopped since the gates opened. It beat against the fortress like a living thing. Wild, furious, ancient. The great hall, however, he had fallen utterly silent. Every noble, every guard, every whisperer who had once sworn that Evelyn Moreau was dead, now stared as she crossed the marble floor, slowly, steadily, her soaked cloak trailing water behind her like spilled ink. Her boots left faint prints of mud and blood. Her hair clung to her cheeks, golden strands matted by rain. She looked thinner, older perhaps, but her eyes, those impossible or steady eyes, still burned with the same calm that had defied a king. The torches dimmed as she passed them, as though the fire itself bent in recognition. At the far end of the chamber, Adrian Kyle rose from his throne. For a moment, the Alpha King and the woman he'd exiled simply looked at each other across the gulf of 5 years. Every heartbeat in the hall seemed to slow, drawn into the gravity between them. You, he breathed, barely a whisper. But it carried through the hall like a spell breaking. Her voice, when it came, was low, hoarse, from years of silence, but unshaken. You look older, Majesty. He descended the dais slowly, every step echoing with the weight of regret. The guards shifted uneasily, unsure whether to bow or draw blades. When he reached her, they stood only an arm's length apart. Rainwater dripped from her cloak onto the marble, pooling between them like a boundary neither dared to cross. You should have told me, Adrian said finally. Evelyn's expression didn't change. You wouldn't have believed me. The words hit harder than any accusation. He saw again the night she'd been dragged in chains through that very hall, the disbelief in his own eyes when she refused to plead for mercy. He'd thought silence meant guilt. He'd built an empire on that lie. Now, face to face again, he realized silence had been her last act of faith. From the side of the hall came the sound of small, quick footsteps. Lucien. He had slipped past the guards, his small form running across the marble, ignoring every shouted warning. Mother! Evelyn dropped to her knees just in time to catch him. The boy's arms wrapped around her neck, clutching her as though he could anchor her to the earth itself. She held him so tightly it almost hurt to watch. Her eyes closed, her face buried in his hair. When she finally spoke, her voice trembled. "You found him?" Lucien nodded, pulling back just enough to show her the locket. "He kept it safe." Evelyn looked up at Adrian then, something between gratitude and sorrow flickering through her expression. "You didn't destroy it." Adrian's throat worked, but no sound came. "I couldn't." The entire court stood frozen, witnessing what they could not name. Not a royal reunion, not a political reckoning, something older, rawer, a wound reopening under candlelight. Evelyn rose slowly, keeping one arm around her son. Her voice turned colder, steadier, the voice of the commander she once was. "They're coming," she said. "The Shadow Court won't wait for moonrise this time. The pact cycle has already begun." Murmurs rippled through the council. The Chancellor, pale as bone, stepped forward. "Lies. She seeks to regain influence through fear." Evelyn turned her gaze on him, and Malric Voss flinched as if she'd struck him. "Still alive, Chancellor?" she said softly. "I thought guilt might have finished you by now." Adrian's gaze darkened. "Enough. Let her speak." Evelyn faced him. "Your father's pact was sealed with their mark, blood of wolf and man intertwined. When I destroyed the runes, I delayed it, but I couldn't erase it entirely. The bond remains in your bloodline, waiting for a new heir to claim." Her hand rested lightly on Lucien's shoulder. "They want him, Adrian. The child born without the binding. The one who broke the circle." Adrian's jaw tightened. "You knew this would happen?" "I knew it would come for someone," she said. "I prayed it wouldn't be him." Adrian took a step closer. "You let me believe you betrayed me. You let me damn you. Why?" Evelyn's eyes lifted to his, steady and unsparing. "Because your faith was easier to kill than your father's kids." He flinched as if she'd struck him. "Do you think I wanted any of it?" She continued, voice breaking. "I burned the runes to stop the pact. I took your wrath because it was the only shield that would last. You couldn't love a traitor, Adrian, and that kept you alive." His voice was raw. "You think exile was survival? You vanished. You left me with ghosts and guilt and a kingdom falling apart." "I left you with freedom," she said quietly. "You just never noticed it was bought with mine." They stared at each other, words failing where history spoke louder. 5 years of pain and pride hung in the air like the scent of ozone before lightning. Then, Lucien's small hand slipped between theirs, neither reaching for the other, only holding space. "Are you going to fight again?" he asked softly. "Because if you do, they'll win before the moon even rises." The hall went still. Even the thunder seemed to hesitate. Evelyn turned away first, drawing a steady breath. "You still command the royal guard?" Adrian nodded, though his voice was faint. "What's left of them?" "Then gather them! The Shadow Court feeds on fear, and this castle reeks of it." Malric Voss interjected sharply. "You have no authority here." Adrian's gaze snapped to him, cold and deadly. "She has more than you ever did." Malric paled, retreating a step. Evelyn's tone softened, though her eyes stayed sharp. "This isn't about crowns anymore, Adrian. The court wants blood, not power. They'll come through the vale where the old wards once stood, where your father's altar lies. Adrian's mind raced, remembering the broken chamber beneath the fortress, the same place where her destruction of the runes had begun. You mean the catacombs? She nodded. At moonrise. The torches flickered as the storm outside deepened, wind howling through the stone like a living cry. Adrian looked at her, really looked, and realized how much she had carried in silence. The exhaustion in her eyes wasn't weakness. It was the residue of sacrifice. He stepped forward, voice low. You shouldn't have had to face it alone. Her smile was faint, tired. You shouldn't have made me. They stood close enough that he could see the faint shimmer of runes scarred into her wrist, the remnants of the spell she'd used to destroy the old bindings. I don't know how to undo what I did, he said. Then start by standing beside me, she replied. Lightning flashed, washing their faces in pale white. For a moment, it looked as though the storm had drawn a circle of light around them. Two figures at the center of an ancient reckoning. Lucien tugged at his mother's cloak. They're watching, he whispered. Evelyn's gaze darted upward to the high windows. Shadows moved, subtle, fluid, wrong. Adrian's blood went cold. The veil's thinning. Evelyn's eyes met his. Then we don't have long. For the first time since her return, his expression softened. Not as a king, not as a ruler, but as a man who finally saw the cost of his crown. He turned to his guards. Seal the lower gates. Double the watch. No one leaves the fortress tonight. When his command echoed through the hall, even the thunders seemed to obey. Evelyn brushed a strand of hair from her face, her expression unreadable. You still give orders like the world hasn't already begun to burn? Adrian met her gaze, quiet, but resolute. Then tell me how to stop it. For the first time her voice softened, almost fragile easy, by remembering who you were before the curse. Outside, thunder rolled closer, shaking the stained glass windows. The storm's light glinted in their eyes. His gold, hers silver, and between them, the reflection of their sun. And in that fragile alignment, Adrian Cale understood the truth he had spent years denying. To save his blood, his kingdom, and the boy between them, he would have to stand beside the woman he'd once destroyed, or lose everything that still bore his name. The first sign came with the bells. Not the morning chime of worship, nor the evening call to rest. These rang with panic. 3 tolls. Silence. Then 3 again. The signal for supernatural breach. By the time Adrian reached the tower balcony, the horizon was already bleeding. The moon, full and swollen, hung too close to the earth, its light thick and red, as though the heavens themselves had opened a wound. Beneath it, the city writhed. People screamed in the streets, dogs howled, and the very air hummed with static magic. The storm that had haunted the realm for days finally broke. Not to rain, but fire. He felt it before he saw it. The pulse of ancient power. A vibration deep in the bones. The Shadow Court had begun its march. Malric Voss moved faster than Adrian could have imagined. By dawn, the Chancellor had already summoned the High Council, cloaking his fear in righteous fury. Your Majesty's mercy has doomed us, he thundered, slamming his cane on the council floor. The exile's return has awakened the curse our ancestors sealed with blood. The moon turns crimson, proof enough. The nobles, terrified, nodded like reeds in a storm. Adrian stood at the head of the table, his fists clenched. This is no proof. The Shadow Court moves because of my father's sins, not hers. But Malric's voice carried farther. Would the court stir if not for her hand guiding it? Did she not return the same night the heavens bled? Whispers followed. Fast, hungry. The fear that lived in the hearts of men had always been easier to rouse than courage. She brings their mark, someone muttered. I saw her wrists glowing beneath her cloak. Witchcraft, demon's bride. Silence, Adrian roared. But it was already too late. Malrich bowed low, feigning deference. Forgive us, sire. But as your loyal servants, we must act before ruin consumes us all. When the guards came for Evelyn, she did not resist. They found her in the war chamber, kneeling beside Lucien, teaching him how to draw protective runes into the dust. The child's small hands trembled as the soldiers entered. Mother! Evelyn rose slowly. Stay with Captain Theron, Lucien. Do as he says. The guards hesitated, but Malric himself stepped forward, smiling the way only traitors can. By decree of the High Council, you are under arrest for crimes of sorcery and conspiracy against the crown. Evelyn's eyes flicked briefly toward Adrian's empty throne. I see. The council acts quickly when fear leads it. Malric smirked. Fear is the weapon of the wise. As they bound her wrists in iron, she looked up toward the window where the moon was beginning to crest the horizon. Red, immense, inevitable. Then wisdom will burn with it, she said softly. They dragged her from the chamber as Lucien screamed for her, his voice raw and small against the roaring chaos outside. When word reached Adrian, he stormed into the council chamber. The nobles fell silent, but Malric was already kneeling at the center, his expression perfectly composed. She confessed nothing, Majesty, but her silence condemns her again. We all remember what happened 5 years ago. The realm cannot risk another false mercy. Adrian's voice broke through clenched teeth. You had no right. Malric raised his head. I have the people's trust, and the people demand blood. Outside, thunder rolled, but not from the clouds. It came from beneath the earth, the sound of stone cracking and the old seals awakening. Adrian's heart raced. He wanted to speak, to stop it, to shout that she was innocent, that he was the guilty one. But every eye in the chamber was watching him. Every noble, every advisor, every whisperer who would tear his throne apart if he defended the woman they believed cursed them. He hesitated. For one fatal moment, he hesitated, and that was enough. By the time he reached the courtyard, the execution platform was already being raised. The crimson light bathed the stones, turning the white marble of the square into a sea of blood. Evelyn knelt at its center, her wrists bound, her head bowed. Her cloak had been stripped away, leaving the silver sigils on her skin bare. Glowing faintly, pulsing with each heartbeat, Lucien was held back by the guards, his cries echoing through the night. Let her go. She's not the curse. She's the cure. The Chancellor turned from the dais, eyes shining with triumph. For the good of the realm, the witch must die before the blood moon reaches its height. Evelyn raised her head, gaze calm as dawn. You think killing me will stop them? The Shadow Court doesn't need my death. They need my blood. When it spills, their gate will open. Malric scoffed. Lies to the very end. But her words struck something in Adrian. He stepped forward. Malric, stop this! The Chancellor turned on him, voice booming. If you defend her again, Majesty, they will turn on you. Do you wish to end the Kael line in disgrace? The crowd murmured, torn between loyalty and fear. Adrian froze, paralyzed by the weight of his crown, his guilt, his father's shadow looming over him like a curse made flesh. The bells tolled once more. Evelyn lifted her face toward the crimson sky. The light caught in her eyes, turning them molten gold. She looked at her son. Lucien, remember what I told you about fear? He shook his head, sobbing. No, please. Fear is the only thing that listens when the world won't. The executioner raised the blade. Adrian took a step forward. Wait! But his voice was drowned by thunder. The blade fell and met fire. The instant steel touched her skin, the sigils on Evelyn's wrists flared white-hot. The air erupted with a shockwave of light and sound, knocking soldiers from their feet and splitting the platform in two. Flames, silver and alive, spiraled upward, wrapping her in a cocoon of searing energy. Her chains melted. The air filled with the scent of iron and ozone. From the fissures spreading through the courtyard, whispers poured, dark and ancient, endless. The Shadow Court had heard the blood's call. Evelyn stood amidst the chaos, her body trembling but her gaze fierce. The fire did not burn her, it crowned her. Lucien reached for her, crying out, "Mother!" Adrian fell to his knees as the ground beneath them began to quake, cracks glowing red with the light of the underworld. Malric staggered backward, face pale with horror. "What have you done?" Evelyn turned toward him, her voice low, almost tender. "What you demanded." The blood moon blazed overhead, filling the night with a terrible beauty. The light poured through her, out into the sky as though heaven itself were being rewritten. Then came the sound of something vast, ancient stone breaking open beneath the earth. The seal had been broken. The Shadow Court was coming through. The courtyard split apart, swallowing fire and stone alike. Evelyn stood at its center, unflinching as the ground tore open beneath her. Her eyes reflected the crimson moon above. Not with terror, but with resolve. Lucien screamed for her. Adrian reached out too late. And in the last heartbeat, before the world exploded into light, the sigils on her wrists blazed one final time. Silver against blood red. As the gates of the Shadow Court yawned wide, the courtyard burned with living light. The ground still split from Evelyn's awakening sigils. Molten cracks glowed beneath the cobblestones, veins of red and silver tearing through the stone like fire chasing blood. The air shimmered with heat and something far older than heat. Magic that remembered every scream ever bound to a promise. From the rift they rose. The Shadow Court. Pale knights of translucent armor, faces hidden behind mirrors of black glass. Their voices were wind and iron, whispering the same sentence in 100 tongues. The debt must be paid. The heir belongs to us. Lucien cried out, clinging to his mother's cloak. Evelyn stepped in front of him, her body trembling, but her stance unbroken. The moon's crimson light painted her hair like gold dipped in blood. "Not tonight," she said, voice steady. Not ever again. The nearest knight lifted his blade, forged not of metal, but shadow itself. The moment it crossed the air, frost formed on the stones. Evelyn reached for the sword she had buried years ago. The one forged in exile, bound with the same runes she once destroyed. When her hand touched the hilt, the sigils on her wrists flared white, and the blade ignited in silver flame. The first strike fell like lightning. Evelyn met it head-on. The clash of her blade against the wraith split the air with a sound that wasn't steel, but memory. The echo of all who had died under the Kael oath. Sparks turned to light, light to flame, flame to storm. She pivoted, driving the blade through a spectral chest. The night dissolved into dust, but from the wound poured a dozen others. "Mother!" Lucian screamed. Evelyn didn't look back. "Stay behind me, no matter what." Adrian appeared through the chaos, sword drawn, half his armor scorched from the fire's birth. "Evelyn! You shouldn't be here," she shouted, parrying another blow. "Then where should I be? Hiding while you burn for me again, too." Her breath caught, but she didn't answer. A tremor ran through the ground. Deep, resonant. From the fissure beneath her feet, she felt the old power stir. The altar, where the first king had knelt and traded a life for dominion. Evelyn's eyes widened. The runestone, it's still here. Adrian followed her gaze. The seal. "Their gateway," she said. "And our end." Before he could stop her, she sprinted toward the center of the courtyard, toward the great circular slab, etched with glowing inscriptions. The shadow knights swarmed, but each fell back as her sword flared brighter, the silver light cutting through shadow like dawn through mist. She planted both hands on the hilt, drove the blade into the stone, and shouted words older than her blood. The counterverse she'd carved into her skin years ago. The world exploded in light. Every torch in the fortress went out at once. The moon blazed brighter, crimson bleeding into silver. Wind howled. The knights screamed as their forms distorted, caught between two realms. Adrian shielded his eyes. "Evelyn!" Her voice carried over the roar. "I told you I intend to end it." The stone beneath her split, and blinding energy poured upward, turning her silhouette into pure radiance. The runes on her skin bled light instead of blood, forming chains that wrapped around her arms. Adrian forced his way through the fire. The heat seared his armor, bit into flesh, but he didn't stop. "Every curse demands balance," she gasped, the sound fragile against the inferno. "It needs a life." He reached her, grabbed her hand. "Then take mine." She turned to him, tears mingling with sweat and flame. "I already did, once." Her fingers tightened around his. For an instant the fire dimmed, as if the world itself held its breath. Then everything turned white. From every tower in Ironmark, people saw it. The blood moon paling to silver as a column of light shot upward from the castle's heart. The storm stilled. The earth stopped quaking. Inside the courtyard, the Shadow Court wailed as their bodies cracked like glass, one after another shattering into motes of light that drifted toward the heavens. Adrian's voice echoed faintly through the blaze. "Evelyn!" But she was beyond hearing. The magic consumed them both. Not as fire devours, but as the sea absorbs falling stars. Their figures blurred together, silver and gold, flame and shadow entwined. Lucien's scream pierced through the silence that followed. "Mother!" The light answered him, a final pulse that swept across the realm, soft and warm, erasing every trace of darkness left in the night's wake. When it faded, only ash remained. For a long moment, nothing moved. Then, slowly, the ash began to glow. Faint silver threads weaving across the ground where they had stood. The runestone beneath the surface pulsed once, then split cleanly in two. The markings that once bound the Kael bloodline dimmed and died. The curse was broken. Lucien stumbled forward, falling to his knees where his parents had vanished. His small hand brushed the scorched marble. Still warm. Captain Theron approached quietly, his face streaked with soot and awe. "She did it," he whispered. From the far towers, dawn began to rise. Real dawn this time. Not blood-red or storm-torn, but pale and pure. The first rays touched the boy's hair, turning it to molten gold. He looked up at the sky, eyes reflecting both sunlight and tears. "She said she'd end it," he murmured. "She kept her word." High above, the blood moon finally faded to white, dissolving into morning cloud. The wind that swept through the broken courtyard carried the scent of sage. Her scent. In the silence that followed, the kingdom of Kael drew its first breath in centuries unchained from blood. The curse was gone. But so was its breaker. And in that loss, something sacred was reborn. A story whispered through the ages of a woman who burned a kingdom's sin into light, and of a king who learned that love was the only power worth surrendering a crown for. As the ashes settled, a faint shimmer lingered above the ruined stone. Two intertwined sigils, one gold and one silver, glowing just long enough for the boy to see before fading into the dawn. When the light died, the courtyard stood silent. Evelyn and Adrian were gone. Not dead, but transformed into the very fire that had freed them. And in the newborn morning, Lucien rose slowly, a soft wind lifting the ashes around him. The fire had bowed, the curse had ended, and somewhere beyond sight, the voices of his parents whispered through the dawn. The blood is clean, the line is free. The storm was gone. No thunder, no ash, no fire. Only the echo of silence, vast and clean, like the first breath after creation. When dawn broke over Ironmark, the castle stood whole again. Not untouched, but renewed. The cracks in its stones had fused with the veins of silver light, and the black scorch marks on its towers gleamed faintly, like scars that had chosen to heal rather than fade. The courtyard where the world had nearly ended lay still beneath a pale sky. At its heart, surrounded by the lingering shimmer of magic, Adrian Kael stirred. He gasped for air as though waking from drowning. His armor was scorched, his cloak half burned, but his body was whole, and over his heart, burned into skin and bone, glowed a faint silver sigil, a mark that pulsed softly with each beat. He placed a hand over it, trembling. Her mark, her protection. When he turned, he saw her. Evelyn lay beside him, still and radiant in the early light. No blood stained her, no wound marred her skin. Her hair spread around her like a halo of gold and ash, her face serene, almost smiling. As though the fire had simply carried her somewhere peace had never left. Evelyn. Adrian's voice broke. He crawled to her side, his trembling fingers brushing the back of her hand. It was warm, faintly, impossibly warm. He bowed his head until his forehead met hers. "I should have believed you," he whispered. 5 years of pride, and you carried them all alone. Wind swept through the courtyard, soft and cool. The scent of sage rose faintly in the air. A sign, or a goodbye. He didn't know. A shadow fell over them, small, hesitant. Lucien. He knelt between his parents, tears streaking his dirt-stained cheeks. His fingers touched his mother's still hand, then his father's. "She did it," he said softly. "She stopped them." Adrian nodded, but words failed him. His chest ached where the sigil glowed. A reminder of what she had given to save them all. Lucien looked up at the sky where the blood moon had faded to white. "Is she gone?" Adrian swallowed hard. "No." He took the boy's hand, placing it over his chest. "She's here. Always." The light beneath his palm flickered, answering like a heartbeat. For the first time, the boy smiled. Not in joy, but in understanding. The curse had been broken. But every miracle came with a memory. Time softened the edges of grief, but never erased them. The kingdom of Kale rebuilt itself in white and gold. No longer the color of conquest, but of peace. The bloodline curse was gone. No more heirs were bound to oath or shadow. The people learned to speak her name again. Not in fear, not as a myth, but as the one who stood against the blood moon and did not bow. The High Chancellor Malric Voss had vanished the night of the fire. Some said consumed by the curse he had tried to command. Others that the Shadow Court dragged him into the rift before it closed. None mourned him. As for Adrian, he ruled for 5 more years, quieter, wiser, forever marked by the silver flame he carried in his chest. Every decree he made bore her memory. Every law of mercy was written in her shadow. When he died, they said the mark on his heart still glowed faintly, as if her magic had waited for him to rest. Years later, under the same dawn sky that had once watched his mother's sacrifice, Lucien Kyle stood before his people. He was no longer a frightened boy. He had grown into a man with his father's strength and his mother's eyes, amber bright with a faint ring of silver when the light caught them just right. In his hand, he held the same faded locket that had once opened the gates of his father's guilt and his mother's redemption. Inside was a lock of golden hair, untouched by time. The great courtyard was filled to its edges. Soldiers, nobles, farmers, children, all silent as he lifted the locket to his lips. "She saved a kingdom that never forgave her," he said, his voice carrying across the stone and wind. "But I will make sure her story is never forgotten." He opened his hand, and the locket caught the sun, casting a beam of gold over the assembled crowd. Behind him, banners unfurled. White and gold, the new sigils of Kale, woven with the twin marks of wolf and flame. As the crowd bowed, Lucien felt something shift in the air. A hush that wasn't silence, but reverence. The wind rose, carrying the scent of sage, and for a heartbeat, he thought he saw her, Evelyn, standing beside the throne's shadow, cloaked in light, her hand resting gently on his father's shoulder, her eyes on him. A smile, faint, proud, eternal. Then she was gone, leaving only sunlight and warmth in her place. Lucien straightened, lifting his crown high as the bells of renewal rang through the city. The people cheered, their voices rising not just for a king, but for the legacy of a woman who had saved them all. Later that night, when the stars burned quietly over the towers, Lucien walked alone through the courtyard. The place where his parents' light had changed the world, sir. He knelt by the cracked runestone, tracing the line where fire had once split the earth. It was cool now, smooth beneath his touch, but the faintest shimmer of silver lingered in its grooves. He whispered, "Mother, you were right. Fear listens when the world won't. And love," he looked up at the stars. "Love remembers." The breeze answered, soft as a sigh. And as he stood, the moonlight touched the stone, revealing for a breath-long moment two intertwined sigils. Gold and silver, glowing just enough to form the shape of a crown. They said he banished her for betrayal. But the truth was crueler. She betrayed herself to keep his world alive. And when their son called him father, it wasn't forgiveness she gave him. It was redemption.